Veena, Shreya, and Nidhi. Good afternoon, good early morning, or good evening to you, Nidhi, depending on your time zone right now. And I'm so grateful that all of you have joined us for this wonderful session. Um, I'm filling in a very large pair of shoes, that of Smita. So my apologies if I don't live up to it. Smita is a phenomenal leader and a thinker, and I'm sure she would have provoked you far more than I'm likely to be. With that said, this panel is not going to be a discussion on challenges alone. It's going to be essentially focusing on agency. What can people do in this very interesting moment that we are in time, and some phenomenal journeys that individuals on the panel have had, and what can we learn from them? The other interesting flavor that comes up is Shreya, who, besides being somebody who's lived a phenomenal and incredibly inspirational life, is also somebody who heads Anita Borg, which is a organization set up to help women in technology. So she then gets the bird's eye view of technology, women, STEM, how do they participate, where do they drop off, where are the challenges, and therefore what are the systemic responses. So besides the lived experiences and topics, it's also then the large view. And from there, what are the cross-pollinated ideas that we can carry over to other parts or other forms of economy or other business areas. So that's the kind of the view we're going to orchestrate. I'm guessing we'll speak for about 60 minutes, and after that we'll open it out for Q&A. I do hope that's okay, and even if you have a pressing question in between, please hold on to it so the wonderful speakers have their opportunity to speak. With that, I will start with a focus on decisions that each of you have made, and not just obstacles. So, Nidhi, if I can focus on you, because you're the largest presence in the room on this beautiful Zoom screen. Nidhi, by the way, was intending to be here in person. She was going to fly in just for the day and be with us. And, the fracas that's happening in the Middle East stopped that, put paid to that flight plan. So late in the evening for her, and she's joining in. So thank you very much for that, Nidhi. If I focus on inflection points and risk as a lived experience, what is the first moment when you chose risk over safety?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Srini. And again, apologies for not being there in person. All flights are canceled. My flight was via the Middle East, and obviously that was canceled. So hello from New York, everyone. I'm here for work, based in San Francisco originally. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. Um, I think prima facie, I think started taking risk. Um, inside safer spaces, I think. So if you look at my career, if you look at it from the outside, it doesn't feel like risk was taken because, went to the right school, then went to BCG, then went to Sequoia, whatever, right? So it doesn't feel like it. So I think very early on started taking risk within these organizations. So I think the main one that I can think of where I actually felt like there was a potential loss associated, like risk. If you say that you want to take risk, that means that there's some loss associated with it, right? Where if you go wrong, there is some impact. And I think the way I would think about it is if you think about when I look back at my time at Sequoia. So Sequoia is a venture capital fund. And when I joined them, they were mainly a seed fund in India, and we had raised a very large round. And the whole game of like winning there was around like, can you do seed deals? Can you like really spread your network and all of that good stuff, right? I think we raised a pretty large round and pretty large fund, and growth was not a thing Sequoia did. And at the end of the day, my thought as a 25-year-old at the time was that how do you deploy like $2 billion by doing $2 million checks? It does not make it. It doesn't scale like that. And so I had gone up to like the head of the fund and said, "Hey, like I don't think we can deploy $2 billion like this. Do you think we could start writing $40 million checks?" And to his credit, he was like, "No, um, but if you want, you can try it. But if you like screw up on your main job, we're just going to hold you accountable to your day job." And so I think that was like a small start for me, where I was like, okay, let me just like take this foray, which nobody else wanted to do. It was a hot potato, destined to fail. Sequoia at the time had not done well on growth even in the US. Um, and like really like started with like one analyst and me, and now that's a pretty large fund for Sequoia, but that was like the genesis of it. Um, Not a traditional risk because obviously, I was still within the realms of Sequoia, but at the time felt like one because it's a very competitive class internally and we're all pitted against each other in terms of score and all of that stuff. But started small, basically, is the thought here.
Amazing. Was as part of that, I mean, as you think of the same phase, was there a moment where you felt there was a signal and you thought, this is the signal, this is now when I jump? Is there a moment like that at all?
I think for me, I think when I think it's always like very first principles for me. Like I look at the market, I look at white spaces, and I think about an opportunity. And if it makes sense to me, it just makes sense to me, and then I can't unthink a thought. That is how I've always been. And so for me, it's like I had done enough thinking. I knew that there was opportunity. I knew there was white space. And then the only thing that I did not have at the time was I was young and I hadn't had enough experience backing myself up when other people said I wasn't right. Um, so I think my whole career has growing that confidence in my own first principles thinking and hunch. That was my first instantiation of it, but it wasn't so much about like other people or external validation. Like I felt it bottoms up. It was more about like being able to convince myself and others to be able to take risks with me.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you for that, Nidhi. And we'll come back and we'll drill it a bit more to understand mentors, advisors, how you navigate
Yeah.
through all that through the sessions. But Veena, if I can turn to you and have the spotlight on you. You've done HR in very large organizations. Are there any specific moments you look for in people? Do you train them formally to be ready for this? How does that work from an institutional standpoint, if you may?
Yeah, first of all, before answering that question, a very happy Women's Day to all the women out here. Yeah, now moving on to your question, there are certainly in large organizations, there are definitively certain programs that are available in terms of identifying, spotting such behaviors and so on. But more than that, what also happens in the large organization is how do you spot that leader, because it's not about that person who makes a loud noise in a room, right? There are many leaders who are in that stealth mode, right? And how do you spot those kind of leaders and bring them to the surface, and so on. So leadership in really giant companies is about in terms of it's that act of kind of assuming the responsibility even before the title is given to you, meaning it's about are you're probably already acting, thinking, and living that kind of a role even you before get the title. I mean, in simpler language, if I some of the traits that what we look for typically, right? So if we can spot out those things is, this is a person who's a natural leader. If there's a fire in the room, right? So he's the person, or he or she is the person who actually picks up the water, and gets into the action, right? He or she is not going to kind of seek your permission. Can I, splash the water against the fire? Or he or she is not even the person who's going to look at how brand complicit it is and those kind of things. Somebody who's quick enough to jump into actions and gets into the problem solving mode, right? Another big things that we would spot is somebody who's able to connect the dots. So are you just going and doing the work that is told you to do and come back, or are you even interested to figure out how the pipes actually run, how are they connected internally, and what does it take for me to go and drill that hole in the ground there, and those kind of scenarios, right? So it's very important for the person to look at the big picture. So somebody who stays connected on that. And the third thing is also what it's very easy to spot is those kind of people. I mean, we keep running marathon meetings, right? So meetings after meetings, action items after action items, which keep happening. So there is this one or two people who actually stand out and say, enough of this meeting and the minutes, and let's get into the action, right? What is that you want us to do? How is that we are going to jump on it and get onto it? It's really creating that kind of energy when there is that vacuum. So those are the typical behaviors I would say we would like to catch on, saying that, somebody who is a kind of a natural leader. And those are the things that we usually spot. Yeah.
Excellent. And let me go back to the same question, or thread, a version of the same question I asked Nidhi just now about what signals, when do you kind of assess whether you got a risk? Now, let me take that view and come back to you from an HR perspective.
Yeah.
Are there signals or things that ambitious professionals tend to ignore? So when you're looking at it from the outside, you're saying you're possibly ready for it. You should
Yeah.
take the
Yeah.
leap. You should dip your toe in the water.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm not so sure this is the right thing for me. Are you seeing that? If so, what messages would you want to give?
Yeah, typically the behaviors, the also common. So some of the green signals we saw, right? Some of the red signals, if you typically, or the blind spots, if I may call it as. What happens to these high potential performers is typically they get into, they are usually the technology experts or functional experts or what. So they know it all. They've been there. They want to grow in that, and so on. There are many people who are looking up to them. They go to them for solutions or suggestions or whatsoever. They are in an influential role usually. What happens in that role is they also get into this narrow snapshot of, I want to become an expert in a particular thing and I'm going to grow only there, right? So if you're a smart manager, typically, right, he would love to keep you, obviously, because you're an expert. You bring that domain expertise, you bring that domain knowledge, and so on. But are you even promotable beyond a point? Are you even ready to take those skills beyond what you have become an expert on? At some point of time, it becomes like there's no place to go. So that's the flip side of these ambitious people that usually we have seen the trend and pattern. The other thing is about somewhere they get into this behavior of not being a good listener. So I know it all. I've been there, I've done that, right? So I don't want anybody's perspective. This is the way we have been doing. It's worked brilliantly for us. And, so I'll operate this way. So all of these becomes, on the flip side, negative attributes, I would say, for these typical high potential performers.
Where I'm coming from is if you go back to when we were kids,
Yeah.
I'll exclude Nidhi from a bit of this. The opportunity spectrum or opportunity scale was so small that we would have struggled to have a conversation like this because it was just all straight jacketed PSU kind of thing. You
Yeah.
clock your time and you get promotions. And now what's happened to the economy is phenomenal. And whether you like it or not, the boat's going to leave or the bus is going to leave and the next bus is going to come along. So either you've got to make the decision to get onto the bus.
True.
Like they say, the rising tide lifts all boats. You've got to be a boat for the rising tide to lift. Either you can sit out and complain or you can be part of it. So that's where some of these questions are coming from. Shreya, you've lived a phenomenal life. What would you add to this piece as an individual who's done your own companies?
So I think there's fundamentally the landscape that we're operating, especially in the last 2.5 years in Anitabi, we've seen crests and troughs of all kinds because of the geopolitics that we're navigating, including right now, right? Future is hanging off a precipice, literally. Women's work is seen as something that is not essential, not mainstream. Diversity is still something that you have to sell, unfortunately, to a lot of spaces that have opted out very conveniently when Trump brought in his verdict. I think there is a certain amount of risk in doing good work. And that risk is you're fighting societal standards of patriarchy, you're fighting capitalism, you're fighting structural religious propaganda, political propaganda. So it is like a pressure cooker situation. And while the tide is rising on one side, the storm's coming in from the other, right? So how do you really navigate these storms is a very interesting question to ask. The AI bubble is a classic example. 2 weeks ago at the AI Impact Summit, we saw what happened. We're talking about AI, and outside the room, it's just chaos ensuing, right? We're talking about traffic systems and how AI is going to navigate that, but there's not enough space for the cars that are driving past Pragati Maidan. So there is a big conundrum of where does the work actually lie? The work actually lies outside these rooms of power. The work actually lies in tier 2, tier 3 towns in India, especially if you see the hunger, the promise. Bangalore is saturated. Drive out and see the kind of enthusiasm there is in outside our mainstream cities. It's a different story altogether. So I think when I look at my own journey, risk was not at all something I was afraid of, because I have jumped so many different ships. But having said that, I think I always looked at what excited me. The challenge had to be juicy enough for me to sink my teeth into it. And then I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. You know, whether it was Aeon, whether it was moving to Anita B. The interesting story is at a juncture, I had the option of heading marketing for Apple in India or running Anita B org. And a lot of people looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? You're choosing this. And I said, hey, should I sell phones or should I work with women and advance their careers? Right? Then the answer became so simple. So the risks that I've often taken have come with a lot of deep reflection on who I am as a person. And I believe that when your North Star is set in the right direction, irrespective of where you're going, what storm you're going through, you will find footing on the ground. And it's a strong footing on the ground.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And Veena, if I can come back to you. So a topic you briefly touched upon in terms of planning and readiness goes to a piece that comes back. Often women think that you build credibility first, right? And you've got to be credible. You've got to overdo what you're doing. And I don't want to call it overdo, but fundamentally you throw 110% into it. Well, some average bloke might be doing 75%. But that's the way you appear best. Your thoughts on that entire topic area? Is it a must? Is it a reality, or is it a perception?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very fancy word, right? In as far as the boardroom is concerned, right? So if you really want people to trust you, to respect you, and so on, and listen to what you're saying, what is coming out of your mouth, obviously, kind of building your credibility is a very key aspect of it, right? So, and it's really not that rocket science as we all talk about it. It's being just that simple, good, decent individual, right? It's as simple as that. For example, I mean, if you look at it in terms of, and according to me, there are about 4 or 5 things, right? So if you even look at, if I say that, I'm going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, I better be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So that's the first step towards the credibility, right? It might appear a very small gesture, but it is so critical and important because you're constantly being measured, judged, and there is perceptions that is being built around you. So even if there are times you're not able to send that report which you committed to, and you have only a partial information and so on, it is very important to go back to that stakeholder and provide whatever information that you have, and say that, I'm depending also equally on someone else. So I'll probably come back to you with the missing piece of information, but this is where it is. So consistently kind of managing that. And again, it is about intensity versus consistency, right? It's not about that one big win that you have had in a project, right? It's not about that high end visibility project that you have had. Everybody talks about you, saying that, oh, you did fantastic in that job. It's also about sometimes picking up that small bits and pieces, which nobody wants to actually pick it up, right? So pick up those things, and it's about demonstrating, saying that I am going to show that equal amount of an impact, whether it's a large project or even it is a kind of a small project, right? So that's credibility building, right? And sometimes also what I've seen is, it's important to acknowledge, I don't think so that anybody expects you to be a master of all, right? It's fine if you don't know certain things, You're also figuring out in the process and so on. But be transparent and let people know, saying that, hey, I don't know a lot about it, but I'm willing to learn, right? I'm willing to go and figure it out. I will probably come back to you for some help if I am stuck somewhere. But rather than, setting an over expectations and under delivering, creates again a perception on you, right? So that's credibility building, right? And sometimes it's also about connecting the dots, like I said in the beginning, right? So it's very important. Are you just interested in what you're doing and just been there, done that, and just finishing and going? Or are you taking that extra mile effort, trying to understand how is the whole system working and what am I contributing in that, and how is that linking, to the larger scheme of things, is also a credibility, right? So sometimes it's also about, we have frequently heard about this aspect of wearing a mask in the professional environment, and a mask when in your personal scenario and so on, which is fine. But just you have to be mindful that when you're flipping back and forth between these two, if you give away your personalities, which will start reflecting, which also can translate to your credibility. So in nutshell, credibility is not those big words and attributes and so on. It is the simple things that what you do, which you can do on a day-to-day basis, builds credibility over a period of time. Yeah, that's very important.
So when you talk of masks and credibility, are you talking of authenticity, being authentic in all situations?
Absolutely. Be yourself, and, again, talk through what you are able to. It's okay to be learning on the journey. It's okay to be, it's about being crystal clear.
Phenomenal. And on the lighter vein, by the way, you mentioned rocket science. You've got two educated aerospace engineers on the panel. So if one of your rockets are not working well, I'm sure we can help. Not that we're
I can't
practicing.
really, sorry. No, do not want to. I pity the rocket that is treated by me.
Neither of us are practicing, is what I should have hastened to add. But Nidhi, if I can come back to you. You come from the investment background. There's this notion of compounding of, anything that you invest into. So if we go forward from where Veena spoke on trust and credibility, is compounding of trust and credibility something that's real? And if so, what's been your lived experience on this?
I think, honestly, what Veena said is actually very interesting to me, because I think a lot of how I have broken out of the woman expectation cloud, and I'll talk about what that is by learning that what Veena said was not applicable to me necessarily. So because I tried to do it, right? I was a good girl. I studied. I worked very hard. I showed up. I did all the right things. I picked up the small things. And perhaps it's because, these are smaller organizations. Perhaps it's because they're like, perhaps very often the only woman there, or only girl there. I wasn't, yet as seasoned as I am now. And I realized that you kind of get relegated into like the helper role. And you get relegated as, oh, she's hardworking. Oh, she is, she's very dedicated. And, these are the words that are always associated with people, that were associated with me when I was like, no, I'm a winner. Like I am a top performer. Like why are these input metrics being associated with me and not the output metrics, right? Of excellence. And I was always very frustrated. I could not figure it out. And I think one real watershed moment for me was, and these are organizations without any DEI, right? Like I think BCG is like where they've hammered it out from the US, and so like they kind of normalize it. And then suddenly you enter finance and they're like, yeah, like nobody cares about that. I mean, they do. Nobody is ill-intentioned, to be very clear. These are like subconscious biases from wonderful, wonderful people who continue to be mentors, continue to be, leaders for me even today. And so I think the thing that I ended up starting to do is like, I one day found out that somebody got paid more in my cohort, despite like me being always told you are the most this and you the most that. And I realized input metrics don't. I realized that being a good girl is not the answer, and I call it being a good girl. You can call it being the diligent person, right? Because that is expected from us, unfortunately. And so then I started thinking about like, where does my alpha come in, right? Like, how do I be slightly subversive, and slightly different, or like so that I can like put some wins on the board that are my own wins, because I wasn't being handed. And again, this is not to blame anyone. Like, VC ends up being a very male dominated industry for a reason, right? Founders are all male, 99% of them. The way they form bonds is like, Arey sir, aa jao, hang out karte hain. And like, that is exactly how, those networks kind of form, right? Like, the money is not in analyzing. Anybody can analyze a deal. The money is in like sourcing, them trusting you, etc., etc. And obviously, they would do that better for people that are similar to them. And so I think fundamentally what I ended up realizing is that I had to kind of build my own little path. So the risk I kind of mentioned earlier was partially first principles for the fund, partially it was like I needed to, if in a rat race, no matter how much I ran, I stood first. Like I would always be like, oh, you crossed the ribbon, but like not, it never, nothing's ever felt enough. And so the whole idea was like, can I build small races of my own that would then start like putting wins on the board, which were undeniable and like unilaterally attributable to me. And I started really thinking about value creation for the people, for the organizations I'm a part of. And again, I was young. I probably wasn't as sophisticated as I was now, but I think that intuition started developing of, hey, like this is important to the outcome of the firm. How do I work backwards from it to create that outcome? And, ideally create it in a way that is very uniquely attributable to me. And then eventually, I think once you have a couple of these points, I think that bias gets fixed, right? I think, I have never, once that reset happens, that reset is also permanent. So I think that it's about like getting that first thing kind of sorted. I don't blame people necessarily for like having biases, because I think nobody's ill-intentioned, and at least for me, it has never come out of malice. In my experience, I've always worked with wonderful people. I think people have subconscious biases and you just need to like break them. I mean, I wish it wasn't the case, but you live in a practical world. My mother ran a construction business, which is more male dominated than I am. And so I think you just need to do it once. It's not, is it fair? No. Is it practical? Yes. And once you have it, then I think good people are everywhere and then they will support you.
Brilliant. So if I kind of pull this together and to all three of you, so there's this whole notion of excellence, and Veena and Nidhi, both of you also brought out this kind of getting a sense of what your excellence is contributing into. So the larger purpose of the business that you're part of, and almost having like an owner mindset in there. Then you also touched on the topic of authenticity, bring yourself rather than try to put on a facade and an imposter kind of a piece. Anything else? And then political intelligence, if I may, from what Nidhi kind of said, there's a point where she realizes it's not just the excellence, but also, and I don't, political begins to sound a bit negative. I'm not trying to say it's maneuvering, but realizing how to work the system. Anything else?
I think politics is very important for us to understand, right? All of us have an identity, and that in itself is very political. So we must understand that this dissociation we want from politics is a comfortable, safe space to be. Nidhi spoke about politics. The landscape is not built equally, right? Gender is very present in the room. Women judge themselves on parameters far higher, with higher competencies, with higher outcomes when you look at results. And I'll give you mass numbers, right? When you look at engineering college results or when you look at MBA results, women are usually ending up topping. The cream is usually the women in the top layer. How is it that goes into a workplace and suddenly transforms and shifts into a very unequal place? Like she said, the input matrices are great, hardworking, committed, but the winner, the achiever, the person who's actually getting lauded at the end of the race is usually a man. And there are enough statistics to show this, right? So when a man and a woman apply to the same role, so the same job role with the same background, with the same pedigree, all of that, men will apply to a role if there's a 30 to 40% match to their JD versus resume. Guess how much that it is for women? It has to be 90% of a match. Only then will a woman apply to the role even, right? So by self-selection, you've already set your standards so high. Now, this is both extrinsic, which means it's conditional. It's the conditional environments that we were raised in to sort of set such high benchmarks for ourselves. And also it's sort of intrinsic from an internalized view of what we've taken from that conditioning and sort of made our own. So it's a double whammy situation, okay? Coming to funding, it is a man's world because only 2% of global funding goes to women-owned, women-run entrepreneurs. 2% of all of the funding money. Whereas women are proven to build better businesses, have better profitability, pay back faster. All of this is on the table. And that 2% are the ones that actually get to the table. Imagine the numbers that are actually being left behind who have not even gotten a seat at that table yet. So globally, funding is only 2%. So let's not be deluded about, this whole credibility thing. When we coach women entrepreneurs, it's actually not the women entrepreneurs that need coaching. It's the venture funds that need coaching because they tell me, no, but that's not true. We invest in women. We pay women to, raise businesses. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. What does your portfolio look like? Right? Because they haven't even, they're like, really? 2%? But no, we don't do that. The bias is so steeped that the reality and the numbers are staring you in your face. You're like, no, but we invest. Okay, if you invested, where is that investment? Show us. Let's get the numbers to talk. Now you flip the scene to leadership itself. Women leaders it's again such a, the good girl rules always tell you to be smiling and affable and, beautiful and nurturing. And what do you need to be a leader? If you were to do an assessment, you need competence and you need, assertion and you need the ability to drive and you need passion. It's a very weird conundrum because everything that's applauded for being feminine, let's say the girl boss or the trad wife, they're both problematic because they're both very structurally patriarchal. And that's why it's important to understand the politics of the way this world has been built and the gender politics of it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once that awareness comes in, and that's why I pat myself on the back for saying some of these numbers, because I know for a fact that that venture fund guy who came and spoke to me and sat with me for 3 hours is now going to go back and look at his portfolio. And every time a woman is in front of him, he's going to remember that he can't ask biased questions. I keep telling people the uterus and the brain are not connected. Stop mixing gender with business. Because women are equally competent, capable, all of that. And we keep trying to put them in boxes that they don't belong in. And then we try and tell them to play the game better when the game was not designed for them at all to begin with, right? So we're still grappling with a lot of these very systemic issues of bias. And all of us have a lot of privilege to break through that, to cut through that. But a lot of the real world does not have the acumen, the articulation, or even the awareness to be able to tackle it. So what happens to them?
Phenomenal. Actually, then that segues very well into the next phase of topics that we wanted to dive into. And so if I think of the two numbers that you shot, the 30-40% for a man before he makes a pitch for something, so that could very well also be the way they're showing up for funding support, right? Versus the 90%. And so therefore, self-selecting is taking most women out of the race, whatever the race, whether it's the promotion to leadership or whether it is the investment in a startup. If you therefore think of the pipeline notion, and I think computer science or computer education, there's almost a 50-50 in college.
Yeah.
But yet, if you go into leadership in any tech world, and again, tech is possibly one of the most gender-friendly institutions today, to the point even Nidhi made in passing about construction industry being even harder, and I'm sure there are many others. Where in this pipeline is a drop-off happening? What does the pipeline look like? Why is it such a leaky bucket or why do only very few get past?
38% is the participation of women in the tech force in India, workforce in India. About 29 million women in technology. As you look at opening level, which is the 0 to 8 years of career, 8 to 15 in the mid-career, it drops. At the VP level, it comes down to 14%. Okay? So 38% has now become 14%. Go to the CXO level, it drops to 8%. And at the CEO level, it's 2%. Okay? And again, the design and the system is flawed because a lot of self-selection happens. I know a lot of mothers who say, I now want to step back. I want to raise children. I want to nurture them. Now, that's not a wrong decision to be making at all. I think choice is a powerful thing. And informed choices are even more powerful. But I think we don't have a system that nurtures an environment where women can make that choice without feeling guilty. We don't have childcare systems. We don't have, community systems of upbringing, schooling, etc. We have very, very nuclear capitalistic systems that are designed to set women up for failure. For every child that a man has, he gains about 7 to 9% of salary. For every child a woman has, she loses 4 to 7% of her salary. Mothers in the room, did the way you work change after you had a child? Did your competence drop? Did your awareness drop? Did anything drop? No. But you're still penalized. And the penalties on the system are long and far and wide. And it's so hard to break them. So what often happens is women decide, you know what, I don't want that promotion. It's okay, I don't want it, give it to somebody else. I'll do the work. There's a lot of this thing around, I'll just do the work. I'm happy doing this because this is the number of hours I can allot to it. This is what I can give to it. This is the mental bandwidth I have for it. The 5 a.m. club is built on the invisible labor of women who have managed to prep your breakfast, get your kids to school, do all of that work. And there is invisible labor that goes into the success of men that seems so effortless because there's somebody back home handling all that shit. Right? We need to talk about these things because policy at the corporate level will only get you that far. Ultimately, people sitting in the boardroom are coming from homes where they see gender very, very clearly, where they see parenting very, very clearly as mothering versus fathering, right? As long as we don't neutralize this in the societal structures that we occupy in our homes, it's going to be very hard. It's going to take from now 131 years for equality to get us to pay parity and equality. Pink tax, pay parity, that's a whole different panel discussion altogether. But when we look at it, the systems need to change inside out, outside in. Otherwise, 15 years from now, we will be at a Women's Day in 2030, whatever, something, and we'll still be talking about this. Nidhi would have launched her, it'll be a fantastic organization. She's probably going to be doing some incredible consulting work. I'm going to be chilling on the beach, but we'll still be talking about the same shit that we're talking about today.
So let me challenge that piece a bit. You earlier also said that Bangalore saturated. And in some sense, that statement was loaded with Bangalore's got enough of these support structures.
Metros, all our metros.
Yeah, I know. And metros to the urban setting. So even if you're in a nuclear family in a city like Bangalore or any of the urban centers in India, you have a large support structure, which is a paid services support structure. So in spite of that, you make this remark, or how do you differentiate the two?
The paid support structure is for 0.01% of the population. We're all the ones that can actually afford childcare, the ones that can afford elder care, the very small percentage of.
But in the tech world and the mid-management to the top management, is that an issue? Can't they afford to pay? But are they
mid-management, yes. Mid-management, yes. Because it's not often financial acumen, it's the mindset of families that say, I want, but my wife has to raise my children, is a very apparent voice in the room, right? And you will see that judgment come on to you if you have men like that in boardrooms. I've sat in boardrooms where I've been told, I'll tell you a story because that's a classic indication of what you just shared. There's a man, I went back to work 84 days because my leave at that time was only 3 months. It was not the mandated 6 months. 84 days I was back at work. And I had this colleague came and say, congratulations, लेकिन आप काम पे वापस आ गए? I said, हाँ. And he said, लेकिन आपकी बच्ची तो अभी बहुत छोटी है ना? I said, हाँ, 84 days. So he said, अगर आप मेरी बीवी होती, वो मेरा बच्चा होता, मैं आपको काम पे वापस आने नहीं देता. Without blinking, I looked back at him and said, इसलिए वो आपकी बच्ची नहीं है और मैं आपकी बीवी नहीं हूँ. But these are the mindsets you have to deal with at work. And I'm sure the women in this room resonate because those are the men you're dealing with. Those are also the women you're dealing with. Because let me be honest, there are a lot of women who resource in the power of what that patriarchy lends to them, right? So the mid-career is not bereft. They have the ability to financially create employment for more women because that's the beauty of it, right? More women come into the workforce. There's more jobs opening up for more women as they do that. But the mindsets that we tackle are extremely difficult. If you go to colleges and you speak to young girls, they say, ma'am, they don't allow us to go to a hackathon because it's outside college hours. So we're talking about the smallest points of access, the psychological load that they carry to have to fight. They don't have the energy to fight for another, position, to fight for another achievement. Some of us will survive the game because we're born ready, wielding our swords, we're armored up. But what about the others that are not equipped to do that? They give up, they sit back, they step back. And then we'll talk about leaky pipelines and not enough women in leadership positions because the work had to be done 15 years ago. And we're still struggling with similar numbers. Numbers haven't changed a lot in the last 10 years, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Nidhi, if I can come back to you, again, early part of your career, do you remember overcompensating very much?
Yes, and I also want to tie back to a couple of things, uh, Veena and Shreya have been talking about. I think the way I have just internalized a lot of this is that I can't control the world. It is not possible. The world is what it is, and I'm not as good a person, honestly, or like somebody who wants to who's dedicated to creating impact enough to want to change society, right? I'm just a person trying to achieve my objectives in life and achieve what I think I should be able to do. And so I think that the reality has been that a lot of it has been about changing myself, to be very honest. And a lot of these have actually helped me, not by exactly emulating what men do, but by working backwards from how they think about life, right? Like I used to be that person who wanted to be 90% ready before I jumped somewhere. And then I used to then I was like, I met my friends who were at the same level and said, Bhai, tum kaise kar rahe ho? And then I learned about their psyche. I'm like, I don't think like this. And so it's a learning for us as well, right? As women. Again, I think Shreya makes an excellent point that we are privileged. I think the institute that I went to, like, gave me that one reset of privilege, right? My upbringing was something, and then like hard reset because of that educational platform. But at some point, we need to crack the code. If you want to break out, you need to crack the code, and unfortunately, it's incumbent on our generation to like fix it for the rest of the women coming after us, because the more examples men see of like successful women owning it, being authentic, the lesser the biases that they're going to have. Because bear in mind, I again want to reiterate, most of the men that I think have biases have them subconsciously because they haven't seen examples of success. And so I just like, in my mind, that there were issues with me as well, that and when I say issues, I mean, like, I think this is a structural issue, right? Like me waiting for like 90% readiness, whereas some dude does not. It is my problem. Like, he didn't tell me to like wait. Nobody else told me to wait. I waited. And so like, these are like important things I think that we need to acknowledge ourselves, not wait for permission and just like fix it, right? Similar like risk appetite, right? Like women are more afraid of taking risk because you're like, somebody will scold me, because I'm used to standing first in the class. But that is not how you win in the real world. You win by taking risks, failing like 3 times, and that one win is so big that it compensates for all the other risk, right? And so it has been a mindset shift over a period of time. And the reason that motivated me to have that mindset shift is that I looked at women above me, and I said, like, oh, even at 40, 45, 50, by doing the straight path, you are still slower than the guys, despite me thinking you're very competent. I cannot follow your path. Hence, what is the thing that I need to do? And then you just go to the guys and ask them, and many of them are very kind and they tell you. They literally tell you everything that you need to know, and you kind of figure that out. To come to your question, when did I stop adapting to the room? When I realized that I was adapting and adapting and adapting, and it still wasn't resulting in the kind of appreciation, success, everything that I wanted. It was resulting in a lot of misery for me, because the emotional load of having a facade was just way too high. And at one point, I'm like, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. Might as well have a good time. And might as well develop something that is authentic to me, that is that does not, emotional load of being a different person actually takes away from your ability to focus on the things that matter, and people can see through it anyway. And so I think for me it's been about like just one fine day just saying like screw it, I'll, this is not me, I'm not the proper person, I am this other person. um it's okay, like I just have to accept myself for who I am, and then the world will, and then just figure out the things that matter. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It's brilliant, brilliant, because you kind of built on what Shreya was touching on earlier. She was talking about how in the VC or the investment community, I mean, again, not the community as a whole, but the whole setup is set for a different kind of a person or a different kind of a role over there, and so obviously most women self-select out or self-edit out. And what you were saying is, yeah, you played that game for a while, but at some point you realize that's not me, it's adding too much of an emotional load, so you changed the room, you turned around and said, where am I going to be far more successful? And you moved to that, and looks like doors open, and it worked.
I would actually, sorry, Srini. I do wanna clarify. I don't think, for me at least, and again, this is like N of one, right? Like this is not emblematic of the average person. The organizations I was a part of are like 10 people, 20 people, right? So this is like, these are not organizations that are 3,000 people. These techniques would not work when you have to do such mass dissemination of like changing biases, right? I had to change 20 people's biases. It's not, that's a very different ball game. 20 very, very like big-headed people, but still 20 people. It is an easier thing to do. I've never changed a room. I'm never selected myself out of, sorry, when I say change a room, I've never changed the physical location of the room. What that means is people told me organization X has terrible culture, do not go there. And I've still gone there. Why? Because it's essential for me. What I have tried to do is like gone there and try to adapt and like figure out who allies are, and figure out like try to figure out myself in that ecosystem. Because I think the minute I start self-editing is when like I start deviating from like that path, and then I don't know where I go, right? Like if I keep selecting myself out of these situations, how do I then get to where I want to be, right? And so it's a lot of tears sometimes, but I think over time you just develop, like I think over time I have developed like a more androgynous personality, I think, which is good, bad, I don't know, found a husband somehow, um but still I think I would urge people to not select themselves out of rooms, um, because you can't deny it. There are some rooms where all decisions get made, and those rooms are brutal and toxic for you in the beginning. And if you self-select yourself out of them, you're deterministically never going to be successful. You might as well try.
Excellent. And Veena, if I can come to you, I mean, there's a fantastic point Nidhi just made, that you shouldn't self-select yourself out. But also she then said, or she said before that, that she was kind of inspiring or kind of working with 10, 20, smallish number, not a large organization. But still, as HR, if you look at it, though it's a large organization, the people that we really network with and work with closely are a small number. So are still some of the techniques that somebody like Nidhi used in her world, in your belief, based on your very wide HR experience, still transportable into other settings? And if so, have you seen, or is there institutional support to make things like that happen? Any comments?
So, I mean, I can first of all so much resonate with what both of the speakers said, right? So, it is very important that how you kind of leverage the system. It is very true in the corporate world, right? So, most of the times, women, I don't know, it is that inbuilt inhibition about I need to be like 200% accurate before I go on, right? I mean, taking my own example, in the beginning of my career, I used to take 20 minutes to write a three sentence email, right? So in terms of saying, I used to write sorry, then I used to remove sorry, I used to sit and figure out, in terms of how will the other person look at me? Will he or she create a perception about me, and those kind of things, right? And going back to her point also, from an IJP perspective, even when we publish many of the IJP positions or the internal job postings, you do tend to see a lot more men applying for it. Even they are like a 50, 60% kind of probably, is kind of with the skill sets. And women are when there are times when we called specific women and we kind of asked them saying that, hey, I thought you would be applying for this role. Why didn't you apply for this role? I thought you were more suitable for this role. They actually point out in that whole lengthy job description, they actually point out those two lines which they probably don't have exposure to. Right? I think it's something which is what is there. The other thing that I've also noticed is in terms of the important aspect of about who can speak for you, right? So in terms of, I know it's very difficult to get mentors. It's not that you just go and ask anybody saying that, hey, can you be my mentor? It's probably most of the times it doesn't work that way, right? So your one thing is, yes, your work speaks for itself, no doubt about it, to a certain extent, but it's also important for you to create your own visibility to an extent that you need to create. And again, as it is not required for you to tell the whole building that what you're doing, right? It's about those key 2-3 people, who should be aware of what value can you bring onto the table, right? It is important that they know, and it's important you speak their language as to what they're looking for in terms of to identifying you, saying that these are the value additions this person can bring in. So I think that when you associate yourself and build your network with those kind of people, that would certainly help. But the fact still remains that it's all about how much you as an individual want to take that effort and do it. And when do you realize that you will actually do this? It's based
Phenomenal.
on.
And I'm happy to invite you all downstairs to the restaurant and later continue the chat. Just as a time check, we've already finished the 1 hour mark. We've got about 25 minutes left. So what I want to do is actually rush through a couple of topics before I open it out to rapid fire and to any Q&A that might be there. The notion of boards. I'm sure all of you have been in front of different boards. It's kind of this very high room, potentially high gender bias to some of the topics that have come up. Any takeaway notes from there or experiences from there that would be very interesting to the audience?
I agree with what both of them said, right? The work is so much internal. So there's a program that I run. It's called Audacious Her, and it's based on a book that Namita and I've just written. And it's about bringing your audacious, authentic self. And you spoke about pretense, mask on. You can't. How much energy are you going to go and putting a mask on in front of boards or in your workplace, wherever that is? That's too much effort, too much energy gone. Again, taking away, siphoning your own inner force for the little bandwidth that you have left. So when you look at showcasing who you are, the work is deeply internal. And again, it's a lot of privilege because not a lot of people can afford therapy, leadership coaches, all of that. A lot of women struggle because the biggest voices they're fighting are already in their own heads. It's something that they've absorbed through time. In my experience, I've chosen very consciously boards that I sit on, and it's a huge portfolio, but half of them are social impact, not for profit, and I think of it as my pro bono time that I give because it's my give back. The rest of them are, again, social impact intersection of a lot of the kind of things I deeply believe in. So although they're for profit, they're deeply purpose-led. So for me, my experience is choose the rooms you walk into. And I love this, how we're constantly taught as women, walk into the room like you own the room. I actually have a reframe of that. Walk into the room like you don't give a damn who owns the room, because then you're not competing for attention. You're not nothing, right? You just walk into it being yourself, and the pressure and that liberation that it gives you. So actually a lot of leadership is about self-work, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's mainstream leadership. And until you recognize your patterns, your shadows, until you do the work with yourself, and until you remove those voices, and it's a lot more of a pressurized container for women, the work is about changing your inner world. And like Nidhi said, when you change what's going on inside of you, what's going on outside of you naturally changes. So irrespective of the boardroom, irrespective of the people, the minute you change your patterns, the minute you change your triggers, you're automatically not available for, the trauma and the trouble that it could lend to you, and you're available to what the potential that room has for you to tap into. So it's a shift, and it's a psychological shift. And that's why leadership is about psychology.
Just to add to that, I mean, definitely I'm with you in terms of, truly give a damn, right? So in terms of speak out, what do you want to speak out, and always not think about, I mean, it's not on you. It's somebody else is forming an opinion about you. It's their problem. That's the way I would look at it. Added to that, what also would additionally help probably is about, I spoke about these mentors and so on. So it is also important for you to kind of, it's not a very fair, straightforward system, realistically, right? So given that imperfect system there is I think it's also important for you to kind of somewhere build that relationship and networks, and probably which translates into your mentors or maybe even sponsors over a period of time, right? So it helps you to a certain extent when the mentors come back and tell you, saying that what's working behind the doors, which you probably are not aware of, right? Maybe that's a good feedback for you to take through, right? And also the sponsor, who is probably an influential person who can put their bet on you in terms of saying that, no, I know this person, I know she's quite capable of doing it. Because otherwise, largely what happens is, yeah, she's all done good, she's great performer, all that is fine, I don't think so she's handled this kind of a crisis, she's not there, right? So only then there is this kind of people who can sponsor you, who can speak for you in terms of saying, no, she has that capability. So that will additionally help, in terms of, apart from removing your own set of biases about you, these kind of additional help would definitely.
Can you, again, coming from the corporate background that I have, I fully understand, or I think I understand every word of mentorship and advisorship that you talk about, and sponsorship. Do you just want to define it very crisply once for everybody so they understand it in the same way you do?
A mentor for me is somebody who is kind of going to probably sit and listen to you, sit and help you solve, certain queries or questions or concerns that you might have. It could be short term, it could be long term, it could be formal, it could be informal. It all depends on how it goes. Whereas a sponsor, and usually, I mean, these days everybody is busy. So as I said earlier, can you go and ask somebody, can you be my mentor? Maybe there are some people who will work towards it. Maybe there are some people who will not agree to it, right? But mentorship is building relationship over a period of time, who can advise you from time to time on how you navigate in the system. Whereas a sponsor, you really can't go and ask for a sponsor, right? It is for you to focus on your work, build on your work, and also ensure that you give the right amount of visibility of your work to one of these 3-4 key people who potentially can become your sponsor. And they're usually those influential people who can go and have that conversations with the key decision makers.
So they're part of the decision-making tree and therefore can influence the decision-making. Basically carry your name into a room often which may
when
not
you're
be
not there. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And for what it's worth, sorry to jump in, but for what it's worth, all men have sponsors and mentors and advocates and all of that, right? This system exists. We are just co-opting into a system that already exists. Like, men don't say, I need a mentor. They just have a mera senior hai type of thing, right? Like, we're just calling it different things, but it's a system that kind of existed that I did not know about. And we're now just like co-opting ourselves into it. So we shouldn't feel, in my mind, deficient in any way for like asking for some of the or wanting these things, because like I think most men, like, how do men know when an opportunity exists, right? Because some other senior person has told them, Kiari, this is a thing, this project is interesting, or this CEO is saying this, right? And we all need it. And so I think I just want to say that when I was younger, I thought it was a deficiency for me to want these things. But I think now I'm just like, this is just how the world works, and we just need to co-opt ourselves into a system that already exists.
Fantastic. And in no way am I recommending you do this, but I've noticed smokers tend to have far better networks because they're all standing outside the building smoking together. So, but in no way am I'm a non-smoker, so I've been on the other side of the fence, if you may. Now, a quick question, rapid fire round with each of you. Shreya, one mistake ambitious women make.
Not liking their ambition.
Very nice. Veena, one form of help to seek earlier.
look for people who can give you a valid feedback from time to time. It's very important you get that feedback and perspective.
Fantastic. Nidhi, one belief to discard.
Don't look at the statistics. I think you should feel like you're on, if it's a normal distribution curve, you should believe that you're on the other side of the normal distribution curve. Yeah, I mean, just don't listen to the statistics, because I think like the point Shreya said, like the statistics involve so many women who are in much, much, much worse situations than we are. And so they're normalizing for a lot of things that some that may not apply to you. And I haven't had this 2% funding issue. I've not had a problem with mentors. So I'm just like, the more you listen to it, the more it like psychs you out. So just like, don't listen sometimes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to all three of you. And with this, I throw the floor open for questions.
Good afternoon, all.
I can't see them.
My question is to Shreya, ma'am. Ma'am, you brought out an intriguing point about this self-selection bias. So, are majority of the women aware that they have a bias? And if yes, how do we combat this bias at a very large scale?
No, a lot of women don't even realize that they haven't. And it's on both sides of the table, right? I have seen women who make decisions for women. Like I've had women leaders who are like, oh, but she just had a baby. And I'm like, but why are you making that choice for her? Isn't it her choice to make? Choices are awarded to men. Choices are made and assumed for women. And that's a fundamental difference in the way choices are even given or spoken about. So this happens very normally, and the bias is very steep. So the constant thing that we need to train our brains to do at scale is to flip the gender. If you were to ask the same question to a man, then go ahead and ask the same question of the woman. But if you're not going to, don't. And the reverse is also true. If a question is going to be asked only to the woman, then, stop doing that. So gender has to be removed consciously in the brain, because we're all hard-coded to believe in that bias. There's also the affinity bias. It's like when you go into the bias world, there's so many. And the more you're aware, the less you will allow that to come into your world. And it has to be very conscious. Bias helps the system, you see. It helps keep it going. So at scale, if you want to change it, it has to come with raging anger to want to change the system. And rage is powerful.
Hello, I'm Mansi. I am a scientist by profession, biomedical researcher. So I'll just try to connect three things that all of you, I think, brought up. Risk taking, I think, following your intuition, mentorship, and then opportunity. So one thing I think that I have seen firsthand, when you take risks, there's like an equal chance that you might fail, right? But there's no sponge to absorb that failure, which is not the case with maybe the male contemporaries. So you're allowed to like maybe take risks, maybe fail, and then maybe try again. So how in this particular situation do you think mentorship can help to give you like maybe a go ahead and fail? It's fine, you'll figure it out later kind of thing.
Okay, so not always, unfortunately, we get that cushioning, right? So in reality and those kind of things, right? So, but I think, how do you even know that you need a cushion always? You're already kind of biased about yourself. You kind of getting into a problem saying that, do I have a cushion? Cushion that is available for me even before I go into, take some risk and so on, right? There are certain areas definitely to seek support. I mean, there are some individuals, there are some, kind of leaders who are available who you can go and have a conversation with, saying that, hey, this is something that I'm not aware of. And this is how I'm planning to go. And I'm sure they will guide you and so on. But it's okay to be vulnerable to an extent, but don't go with a preconceived notion saying that the system will never accept this one and I always need a cushion. It's very important for you to go. It's okay to fail sometimes, right? So, but it depends on what kind of risk are you taking, and in terms of, how big an impact it could be, right? So you need to take that calculated risk, and it's okay to venture into it. Not always you will in reality get a support at every point in time, right?
And if I may just add a line, I think women have to change their relationship with failure. I think it's a very important step of making friends with failure because it's only going to open more doors for you. I think the way we see failure is our biggest impediment in the way we handle it. So if we changed our relationship with it, we change the way we deal with it. So the biggest mentor that's available to you to heal your relationship with failure is yourself.
It's the same rationale what she gave as an example in the previous question, right? Saying that it's not that men don't fail.
Yeah.
Men also fail, right? They also take risks. It's not that every guy there out there also gets this cushioning. So it's okay when they are ready to take. Why not you?
And in fact, I would say that women have an advantage here because there is a societal expectation for men to like make money and like do a lot of things that, frankly, should have made them even lesser likely to take risk, right? Like at the end of the day, you're the one paying the bills. I mean, in a traditional, not in my situation, but in a traditional situation. And so if they can take risks when, the family depends on the breadwinning is theirs, then conditionally we should have been more risk taking, but somehow we've become less risk taking, which we have to condition ourselves out of. But the answer is there's no cushion. You should assume there's no cushion. Nobody's coming to save you, and it's only by like accepting that I think eventually start small risks and build up your own confidence in your own ability to pick yourself up and compound over time. Because the reality is like no mentor wants to support somebody who needs support, right? Like that's the reality of life. Nobody wants to support somebody who needs support. People want to support somebody who do not need support but is going to shine and look good for them tomorrow. And so that's just the psyche of it, right? The more you depend on them, the lesser you're going to get it. It's a very perverse thing, but it is true. I don't know if that helps, but I think the more we internalize this, the better.
Hello, panel. Really excited to be here, and thank you so much for the conversation here. I'm Purabi. I work as a leadership coach, and I've been working, I think, for over the last decade primarily with returning mothers. Part of my corporate career, and then now independently. And I think one thing that I have discovered with the number of these conversations is, like the panel has already spoken about, the mindset, their self-limiting beliefs, and how the self-doubt doesn't necessarily kind of let them move forward. But in these conversations, one thing that I've discovered while talking to them is we can change the narrative when we help them see that they are today in a powerful position, being a mother, right? We're talking here about 15 years later, what kind of conversations can we have? What is a reality going to look like? And the thing that I've been telling to most of these mothers of my clients is you have the power to make a difference by the narrative that you're sharing with your children, right? I would love to hear the panel's thoughts on this, that what would you really advise these women? How and what can they really kind of say to their children as they're helping them grow up, come up with their own thought process and views, so that tomorrow is a better world for them? Girl or boy, doesn't matter.
Unfortunately, the reality is the most regressive set of men in the world today are between the ages of 14 to 28. Adolescence, the series was made on this construct of the manosphere. And while we're equipping women with a lot of the tools and the tactics, we're not really taking the men along. I'm glad to see rooms in this year's Women's Day that have invited men to the conversation, because usually it's an echo chamber. Men are left outside the room and these things are spoken of. I think change comes when it's collective. And I think the first step is the Montessori education that teaches you life skills. And life skills have no gender. Running a home has no gender. Parenting has no gender. Running the washing machine, cooking, cutting vegetables, all of these are chores. Anybody can do it. I think eliminating gender from our everyday is a very, very important aspect of that. And I think homes have to embody that. Kerala is the first state to have launched textbooks that have neutralized chores, right? That don't show women cooking in the kitchen as mothers. And I think the ask of all parents, the 15-year journey that we're talking about, change happens when you live it. When you come home and the woman goes straight into the kitchen to fix the dinner and set the table, it's unequal and unfair. You can't then send those boys and girls from that house into a workplace which says, now it's all equal. I'll ask the women in the room the number of times you're handed a knife and a birthday cake has just been cut. I'm like, why? It's a knife? You didn't learn geometry? Like, it's a cake. Cut it. Right? Or the number of times you're asked to order coffee. Why? Do you not have an app? Do you not know how to order something? You know, there's an entire thing around how there's an entire generation of kids growing up thinking secretaries are women because of Alexa and Siri. So parenting is walking the talk. And it's right now not very level playing.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kavita. So I first of all thank you so much for a wonderful, intense discussions and sharing whatever you guys have shared. It's really grateful for you. And I just love to go with the Nidhi's thought that the chaos is so much. So we are really grateful to be here at least, and better to focus on ourselves and surrounding us. Yes, we have to make a bigger impact. So Mike, another one, this one question is that I am in a stage of middle career. Like all my mothers used to say, okay, this is the routine, you have to go along with that. So somehow I cop up, somehow I really feel grateful I can handle myself. But the next generation, who are just married or 3 years, so for them, their mothers are telling the same thing. I'm in between. I feel that gap has to be cut. So it should not go further in a way that they have to, along with that, they have to take the same thing. I don't know to say any scientific word for that, but still, I just wanted to break that line, in between line. So the ladies and the women have to go and know that they are worth more than that, than the mothers. I always tell whomever come to me, respect your mother. I absolutely admire my mother because the way she has gone through, but I will never wanted to go through what she has gone through. So I always respect in that way, but I choose myself. I'm proudly a single mother. I have not divorced. I have just paid my husband's loans. I'm first time I'm sharing this because of your inspirations, but I doesn't want to show off these things. But still, society is not valuing it, and I doesn't want that value. I'm absolutely happy, and I'm absolutely a great mother who's now having a son of a 16-year-old. So but I just doesn't wanted to motivate people. I wanted to break that line. Women has to come out of that mothers, that same old stories. And what you people will just give that suggestion for those girls, so that that chain has to cut off, and next 15 years we should never discuss this. I just wanted the point what you were just told me. Thank you so much.
I think firstly, thank you for sharing. Sharing, when you share bits of your life in safe spaces, they say healing comes to you. And it takes courage to share, but you've just inspired an entire room of people, right? How do you break it? By doing exactly what you're doing. If every woman has the courage to live her life on her terms, on her desires, needs, wants, and can pay it forward by, like you said, women come to me and I tell them that you're already doing that in your own way. So how do you break it? By doing that exactly, by being unapologetic about the choices you make and standing up for them with courage. So thank you for sharing.
I'm sorry, there's only time for one last question. Hi guys. I wanted to know, how do you know when to draw the line? So Nidhi, you mentioned that there was a company wherein you heard from people that it has a toxic environment and you still joined it. But how do you know that enough is enough and now I need to choose myself because this is now going to impact my mental health or it's going to translate into other areas in my life?
Oh, that's an excellent question, actually. I think when it starts impacting your mental health is the answer. That is the answer. I think there are a couple of things where you draw the line, right? Like I think anything where you feel unsafe, like physically, is definitely like a bright line that you should not be like voluntarily jumping into a situation where there is like shady stuff that's going to happen. I think that is a bright line for you. For at least for me, it is. That is not one place where I will say no, I will be Jhansi ki Rani in that situation. No, that there's too much mental trauma there. But on the other side, I think when it starts affecting your self-worth, I think is when you either try to fix it, or if you cannot, then you kind of figure out a different situation. And the reason I say that is because I think our own self-worth is like the biggest source of energy that we have. Because to me, like my self-worth is what gives me the confidence to take risks, it's what gives me the confidence to show up in a certain way. And if I feel like I'm becoming a diminished version of myself, and I always try. I never I give it like 6 months, 1 year, whatever. If it doesn't work out and your self-worth is getting affected, it is far more expensive and I say don't mean expensive from a therapy perspective, but far more expensive from like a how much investment it takes to rebuild your self-worth. And the loss of self-worth is like more harmful. And then you just say like, okay, quit. I give up in this equation. I will find myself a better equation. And the positive thing with India now being a deeper economy is that there are alternatives. So like your situation is hopefully not the only situation in the world that you can work in. There are other places, which was not true in the 90s or like the early 2000s when my mom was working, right? There were very few jobs available. Now there is some mobility possible. But I would just say when it affects the long-term sustainability of your self-worth and your mental health is where I will draw the line.
But just to add to that, my own personal experience, right? So when women, what I have seen generally don't like to have that conflict, right? So they don't want to when they know they have, kind of surrounded in a toxic place, it could be a manager, it could be a peer, whatsoever. There is unfortunately no nicer way of dealing with that, right? So I think it's time when you feel I don't deserve this, it's time for you to kind of speak up. It is very important that you have that. I've also seen scenarios in corporates, somebody else comes and complains on behalf of another person, right? So the first question I ask them is saying that, why are you talking on her behalf, right? So, it is about, there is nothing that you're going to lose. If you don't stand up for what you're going through and you don't discover your self-worth, I don't think so nobody is going to solve the problem for you. Right? The system will support beyond a point, but the initial efforts of saying that I'm not going to tolerate this behavior or this is not what I'm looking at has to come from the individual, no matter how difficult it is.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to three amazing speakers who've done a tremendous job speaking on a difficult topic. Thank you so much, Nidhi, and we're very sorry to keep you up very late today. And really look forward to having you back in Bangalore sometime soon. Thank you very much, Veena. Thank you very much, Shreya. And a big round of applause again, please. Thank you.